Okay, Bismillah, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillah. We are back for another Muslim Morning podcast. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh. How are you doing?
Wa alaikum salam, brother. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, mashallah. Okay, from last week, we spoke about the second source of Islam, the Sunnah of Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. We went into some detail about how that's been preserved and how the Muslim benefits from the Sunnah. But what came to me at the end of that discussion is the issue of how does the Muslim, um, you might say, differentiate between acts of worship, specific acts of worship like the praying and the fasting and the Hajj and the Zakat. And you might even go into aspects of how the Prophet dressed, what food he ate, um, how can you say, other actions. How do you differentiate between those actions which are actions of worship and those practices that are cultural, you might say specific to Arab culture? Okay, under the kind of title of Does Islam Come to Change Your Culture? Is following the Prophet ﷺ about adopting an Arab culture? And how do we differentiate between those actions which are actions of worship and those things that are specific for the Arab culture, inshallah?
Okay. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulihil Kareem wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa man tabi'ahum bi ihsan ila yawmiddin. So, I mean, the topic of culture is a big one.
Yes.
And when I say big, as in it's big, it can be big if people want it to be big, and it can
Yes.
be small if people want it to be small, if that
Mhm.
even makes sense.
Mhm.
So, okay, how can it be big if people want it to be big? If
Mhm.
people want to resist giving up what they practice, what they do,
Mhm.
then obviously in their minds, shay'un azim, it's a big thing.
Mhm.
Whereas if in their minds they do whatever Islam prescribes, and Islam takes precedence and priority over all other things,
Mhm.
then in practice it's a small thing. It's a minor thing. It's not a serious or magnificent event. It's just one of those things. So
Mhm.
you mentioned about the issue of Arab culture and whatnot. Now, generally speaking, and this is again my experience may be
Mhm.
limited, may not be in line with the what people themselves believe, but from my experience, those who resist, also those who have issues with other people's culture, usually have um, as an element of fanaticism about their own culture. So, for example, I'll give you an example. Statements like, "Oh, no one can make food as good as our food," or "No one can make this cake better than ours," or "We make the best this." These are all fakhr. This is all elements and examples of fakhr, showing off, saying, "Yeah, we are the greatest." Even Muhammad Ali, when he mentioned in boxing that he is the greatest, and he
Mhm.
mentioned after that how he believes that Allah had humbled him for those statements, that he was
Mhm.
actually the greatest. But these kind of beliefs and behaviors and stuff, for me, indicates that a person gives too much credence and credit to their own culture. Culture has a purpose. Culture has a function.
Mhm.
Culture unifies the people who are different, and it
Mhm.
allows certain practices to be implemented. I mean, just let's just take a step back for a second. Let's take a step back away from culture. Let's just look at Islam
Mhm.
like as a societal glue that holds people together.
Mhm.
If we all consciously made effort to enact all elements of Islam, then it would at some level be a bit laborious. As in,
Mhm.
you're being nice to someone purely only because it's been ordered to be nice to someone. You're actively focused on every aspect of life of doing something other than what you normally would do because you're following Al Islam.
Mhm.
obviously you can do that, and people can do that. But if everyone in society is all actively trying their best to behave other than the way that they're you could say wired to behave, it can become a bit laborious upon an individual. What will naturally happen though, or what Islam as a society wishes to get to, is for the society as a whole to adopt Islamic ideals or principles until it becomes natural, until it
Mhm.
becomes a part of your psyche, a part of your being, who you are. I even
Mhm.
made a comment to my wife the other day, funny one, said that it's interesting that I've now been Muslim longer than I was ever non-Muslim,
MashaAllah.
which is a nice thing to think of when as a person who's come to Islam
Mm.
at a later age, that Alhamdulillah you've actually spent on the planet Earth a Muslim longer than you was not a Muslim, which is not always
Mm.
something that everyone can. Anyway,
Mm.
but the reason why I said that is because um, for if someone was to say, would you ever go back to life before Islam, for example,
Mm. Mm.
it would be more difficult. I'm saying putting aside the fact that I actually believe in Islam, putting that aside for
Mm.
a second, it'd be more difficult practically
Mm.
for me to do that than for me to now become Muslim, because I was actually non-Muslim a
Mhm.
lot less, a lot less of my life than I was a Muslim. If that makes sense. As in my
Yeah.
life, I've now become so much
Attuned.
attuned to Islam
Mm.
that to do
Mm.
anything else is now for example, if I had to put on a suit and tie, for example,
Mm.
the fit of the trousers around my leg would be really uncomfortable for me. I'm like, what the heck?
You're not used to it now.
I'm not used to it because I like to have the trousers. Give me some space, give me some room.
Mm. Mm.
You
Mm.
know what I'm
Mm.
saying?
Mm. Mm. Mm.
Um, but on the flip side,
Mhm.
when I remember this event specifically, when I first became Muslim, a friend of mine, he said to me, he's wearing a thobe for Jummah. This is like a couple of weeks even into Islam.
Yeah.
And he said to me one day, he said, one day you'll be wearing a thobe like this.
Mhm.
And I laughed at him. I thought I'm not wearing a skirt.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I get you. I get you. I mean, that's a poignant thing to speak about because when it comes to cultural things, it may be a barrier for some people to adopt a different dress. Or if I'm embracing Islam, does that mean I have to wear thobe or kufi? Um, a woman might say, "Oh, why do I have to wear a hijab? Is hijab a cultural thing, or is it something that's been commanded by Allah?" So, and also another thing, which is unfortunate, there are how can you say derogatory thoughts about the Arabs, about the historical Arabs, what happened in the past, etc., etc. So people can use this as an excuse to say, well, okay, he's an Arab prophet, he's not from my culture. Why should I adopt his way of life? There's a bit of a pushback to Arab culture, but the angle that they should be coming from is, how do I worship Allah correctly, irrespective of where this prophet has come from? Do you get what I'm saying? So sometimes the cultural barrier can be, well, okay, he's not from this part, he's not from my people, I'm not going to follow him. And also that change aspect of wearing a thobe, um, changing certain manners, it can be a certain barrier. So if they know these particular actions are worship, and these particular actions are cultural, i.e., wearing the thobe maybe or wearing the kufi, etc., it may be easy for them to digest that there's not a big cultural shift, if you get what I'm saying.
But that's the thing. What I'm trying to get at is that I think there's a bit of devil's deception here going on.
Mm,
There's a bit of deceit going on here with this topic of culture in people's minds.
mm,
Culture is so much more rich than just clothing and food.
mm-hmm,
And I think when people reduce culture to clothing and food and say things like, why should I dress this way? And should I have to dress that way, for example? It kind of allows, it's kind of like a gateway or a trigger or a door from Shaitan to facilitate you rejecting everything else. And
yes,
when I say everything else, I mean the more important thing is your behavior. When you become Muslim, you must listen carefully, everyone. This is important point. You must adjust and change your behavior in all facets, in all parts of your life. You need to change your behavior, how you treat the poor, how you treat your family, how you treat your parents. But the thing is, we never associate these things as culture, but it is. So when you go to, for example, that's why again, I know every week I always bang on about this topic, but the issue of hijrah, that's one of the hidden features of hijrah is you're not just going to a place because the weather's nice. It's because the culture of the people has Islam woven within its fabric, so that by just being there, it will change your behavior to be in line with Islam, even if you are even unaware of it. So it's not just about the clothing, it's about everything, who you are as a person. So, for example, I mean, I saw a 6 minute video just a couple of days ago about Japan. And the title of the video was, "It's very difficult to lose things in Japan," because they have a very deep rooted cultural practice of looking for owners of lost property and returning lost property to its owner. Big or small, whatever the case may be, people return it a lost property, and they say it goes back generations. And what was interesting is that in one part of it they said that why would a Japanese person who just found thousands of pounds of money on in the street, why would they return that money, that kind of thing. And they mentioned that when they said it, I laughed almost. They said because the shame that will come to them for taking that is far greater than the benefit, the money that they have. As in, they've woven within themselves this idea of public shame for what? Taking someone's property or not returning someone's property to its owner. That's culture. So the reason why they actually it's hard to lose things in Japan isn't because the government has mandated you to return lost property and because the government has certain institutions for you to hand in lost property in it. It's not because of that. It's because the culture of the people is that if you find something that's not yours, you return it to its owner. That's a cultural thing woven within the people's being. So, for example, if you go to Japan, by being there, over time, you will adopt their behavior and mindset. So, back to the issue of looking at Arabs in a negative way and saying, Arabs, I'm not Arab, and blah, 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 blah. Already, before we even open a discussion about their clothing or their foods, we're already including in that indirectly their behavior and their culture. And as a Muslim, especially a new Muslim, listen carefully, especially a new Muslim who's just entered into the fold of Islam, who looks at the Arabs and looks at the Asians and looks at the Bengalis and the Malaysians and the Indonesians and looks down almost disdain, why should I have to be like them? That's a problem. Because them, a large section of their culture is Islam. And how could you really possibly, a new Muslim, separate what is their cultural practice from what their Islamic practices are? And I'm sure you'd find that majority of their even cultural practices, its roots is al-Islam. And Islam actually would agree with what they would say, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So again, I don't, what I want to say is I don't want to reduce this conversation to clothing, although that is a part which we were asking about clothing. I want to say I want to expand and include all that which is culture to all that it is. So if you go, for example, like I went to Turkey, for example, the generosity of the people. I mean, random people I've never met before. I can't even speak the language. I ask them for directions, and they want to take me by my hand and take me physically to the location because they can't speak the language. What made them that way? Culture. How? Why would you say it's culture, brother? Because everyone's like that. It's not one or two people. Everyone is like that. That's a cultural thing. And as a Muslim, we want to adopt cultural practices of the other. And this requires what we mentioned so many times in previous discussions, humbleness. If you're not willing to be humble when you come to Islam, you're going to struggle. You're going to struggle because you're going to have to give up that nonsense. So back to my comment to that guy, I'm not wearing a skirt. That was an example of that pre-Islamic arrogance that comes, especially when it comes living in the West. where apparently
Yes.
we do things the best, we do things better, and all that. Nah,
Yes.
nonsense. Yeah,
Mm,
there are things in your culture which may be in line with Islam, may be great with Islam, but there's no special virtue in your culture
yes. Yes.
why you
Yes. Yes.
must hold on to it in a particular way. And the joke is, by virtue of actually accepting Islam, by saying I believe in Allah, there's no one worthy of worship but Allah, and Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. By virtue of saying that,
Mm,
I'm acknowledging that what I was on, all of it, was
mm,
wrong. Was
mm.
not wrong in parts, but fundamentally wrong. The fundamentals of my way was wrong, and now I'm going to
Yes.
adopt a different fundamental way, and I had to build myself from different fundamentals. Does that make sense?
Yes. So those fundamentals, are they? And this is where we kind of want to differentiate between Arab culture and actions of worship. There are obviously there are aspects of Arab culture which is Islamic,
Yeah.
whether it be looking after your parents, generosity to your guest,
Yeah.
as you said, inviting people to your house to come and eat. That
Hmm.
basis is Islam. But what we find is could be because of political issues. It could be because of historical situation that happens between Arabs and other communities. That it's a bit the water's a bit muddy now.
Hmm.
But what
Hmm.
we have to kind of explain, and what I want to kind of explain in this thing, that when someone does adopt Islam, they're adopting righteous, you might say, actions and behavior that are ingrained in the Quran and the Sunnah. As I said,
Yeah.
you know, um, respect to your parents, looking after the guests, being generous to the orphans, and the
Hmm.
other political stuff and historical stuff has to be pushed to the side.
Yeah. So no doubt, every Muslim community across the globe has certain things which are unique to them based on their environment. And the only thing that Islam really would uh, oppose in their cultures are that which breaks the fundamentals, that breaks the details of Islam that Islam has come specifically to prevent. So, for example, certain acts that are attributed to their pre-Islamic culture or their pre-Islamic behavior from the past. For example, um, caste system. For example, saying that someone's from a particular caste, and therefore because they're from a particular caste, this can't happen, and this must happen, and this person can't white can't draw that kind. These kind of things you can say that is a pre-Islamic behavior that opposes Islam, and therefore we cannot adapt those things to Islam. But for example, a new Muslim, let's get to the point. So, what would a new Muslim do? They've just come to Islam and they want to now adopt Islam. And like you said, how do you differentiate between that which is culture and that which is not culture? Simple question: Is or I mean, it's easy for a revert or person who's just come to Islam because they are working from a blank slate. Whereas, for example, if someone was born Malaysian, raised in Malaysia, so born Malay, raised in Malaysia, for them it's more difficult because the assumption is what they are upon is already Islamic. So it's essentially they have to kind of identify parts of who they already are, which is Malay, which is not in line with Islam, which may be more complicated than it might look. But there are certain things which may be in opposition to Islam. But the joke is that some things it doesn't oppose Islam, it doesn't support Islam. It's just a thing, and those things there I think is the complicated part because Islamic um, principles are that if you're in a certain environment, like if you live in Indonesia, and the Indonesians do X, Y, Z a certain way, that doesn't oppose Islam, nor does Islam say you must do it. So it's neither here nor there. Islam doesn't say you must do, and Islam doesn't say you shouldn't do. It's in the middle, something you just can do it that way. Then it's in your best interest, and Islam encourages you to just stick within the remits and the framework of that environment. To the point where even narrators of hadith used to be criticized if they didn't adopt certain cultures of the area that they were residing in. So, for example, certain narrators of hadith might be criticized because they didn't wear a turban in an area where people wear turbans. Why? Because they are opposing the social norms. And this is another thing
Okay.
coming, social norms. What are the social norms amongst the Muslim community? So, for example,
Gotcha.
I'll give you a classic one. I'll give you a good one.
Mm.
I was in Medina,
Mm.
and I was sitting in the lesson of Sheikh Sulaiman Rahili. And
Mm.
I really was fascinated with him as an individual, as the way he taught, especially as he was a specialist in usul al-fiqh and qawaid fiqh and all kind of things. So I really wanted to, study hard, you could say, underneath this particular individual. So every lesson, I used to make sure that I was the first one in the masjid, and I sat right in front of him. I always made sure that. And one day, my leg was killing me, so I stuck my leg out towards the
Yes.
sheikh,
Mm.
and I got some Arabs nudging me. And I was like, what? So you're putting your feet towards the sheikh? And I said, so? This is, babe, you shouldn't do that, it's wrong. I'm like, okay. So I put my foot in, and now in my head, I'm like, that's a stupid thing, man. So what? I mean, I don't mean anything by that. But that's the thing. It's not an aib because Islam says so. It's an aib because the culture says so. So what should Muawiyah Taka do in that environment? Listen and don't do it. So since that day until today, I don't put my foot towards people because I know it offends certain people's culture. So that's an example of adaptation to a cultural practice that doesn't harm me to do so. Islam doesn't order me to do so. If anything, it's respecting their behaviors and their practices. Now, will I get reward by Allah for doing this thing which is not prescribed in Islam? Yeah, you can. You can get reward. But wait, why would you get reward for not doing that? It's called adab. Being respectful and understanding to your fellow Muslim is required in Islam. You see what you're coming from? So it's almost prescribed in Islam, but indirectly. It's prescribed by being understanding and respectful to your fellow Muslims. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, for example, imagine in UK, if someone says, "Do you want to come in for a cup of tea?" and you say, "No, I'm all right. I'm on my way home." That's fine. No one's gonna be anyway. Another culture, if they come in and have tea and say, "No," that's aib. What do you mean? You're not gonna have tea with me? That's rude. So in that scenario, respectfully, I'll come in, I'll have a sip, and I'll go. That's what they are requiring. Come in, sip, and go.
Yes.
So you understand? It's about understanding and being respectful to other people. It's like the other day, I said to someone, I said to someone the word "but." You know, "but" as in someone's behind. And I said, "Oh, why are you swearing for?" I was like, "That's not swearing. But it's not swearing. But it's just a butt. You know, it's short for it's short for buttocks. It's not a swear word." And they took offense from the word "but," and they mentioned that in their culture that kind of stuff don't fly. And when they mentioned that, I said, "Okay, you know what? You're right. I mean, this is not a thing for me, but I get it. It's a thing for you." So I stopped, and that's being respectful. That's being understanding and respectful to other people. Another example is the word "crap." I know in UK, it's not that bad a word. It's not like something serious. But I heard the other day, someone said to me, "Oh, I heard you swore on Islam channel," something like that. And I was like, "Swear? Why would I swear on TV? I'm not a person that goes to swear on TV." And I said, "What did I say?" And he said, "Word crap." I said, "That's not swearing." And I said, "Yes, it is." And it turns out in America, they consider it swearing. Again, that's the issue of culture and cultural behavior. So anyway, back to the point. This issue of I don't want to accept Arab culture. I think it's a wrong hand waving approach towards culture, even if it is Arab culture. So what? That doesn't mean you mustn't act in accordance with that way towards an Arab in respect for their culture and their behavior. Just like you would expect them to respect your culture and your behavior if they were in your remit, your frame. Makes sense.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between if you travel to a next man's country, then you must respect their cultural practices, etc.,
Yeah,
etc. I'm
yeah.
talking about the fact that if you're taking on Islam, you're expected to change your way of life according to the word of the Prophet ﷺ.
Yeah.
And intermingled with that is Arab culture. How do you differentiate, for example? But
Oh, you mean from the root of the Prophet Muhammad and what they used to do at their time?
yes, but there's
Okay,
I just want to put in a caveat: the fact that what the Muslims should know is that I think they call it urf. Is it
Oof.
culture? Urf is actually respected or can be a source of law from place to place.
Yeah. So I mean, there's two questions there. So what you touched upon is the issue of which this does occur. I've had that I have had that discussion with people
Mm,
where they say, oh, they would dismiss something from Islam and say, oh, that was just Arab culture.
yes,
They might
yes,
say, oh, the niqab is just Arab culture,
got you.
or this is just Arab culture. Referring not referring to Arab culture today,
Mm,
referring to Arab culture at the time the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
so,
So what they're saying is that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did certain things, did certain practices that wasn't necessarily prescribed by Islam, but it was just something that was done at his time, and therefore it's not something which is prescribed
mm-hmm,
specifically in Islam today.
mm-hmm,
So, for example, the issue of the turban, the Arabs used to wear a turban. So some people say turban is sunnah.
mm,
The turban is the sunnah or is a sunnah because the Prophet Muhammad used to wear a turban. And others say no, he wore a turban because that's the Arabs did. It wasn't prescribed in Islam. It wasn't a part of Islam. It was just something that was done at the time. So therefore, it's only Arab culture. Likewise, the niqab and so on and so forth. Um, now that that is that's actually a fiqhi question. That's actually a question of Islamic law, because essentially the difference of opinion here will be: is it actually something you get reward for
mm,
specifically because the practice that was done at the time, as opposed to if you did it, there's no extra reward in it. As in, if
got
it
you.
is a sunnah, therefore by doing so, by virtue of doing so, it's rewarded. And if it isn't sunnah, then by virtue of doing it, it's not necessarily rewarded. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So, first and foremost, what needs to be understood is that whether you're on this camp saying it's sunnah or that camp saying it's not sunnah, every Muslim cannot deny that by doing that, because the Prophet Muhammad himself did it,
Mm,
makes it virtuous.
yes.
Even if it wasn't prescribed in Islam, it was still virtuous because
Mm,
you are, by virtue of not the action, but by virtue of the emulation.
yes. So just to cut you, sorry to cut you. So by emulating what the Prophet ﷺ did, how he spoke, how we ate, how we used the bathroom, um, all these outward actions that we could see by emulating them, whether we associate it with Arab culture or not, if Prophet ﷺ did it, by emulating him, it's an act of worship.
Yeah, so hold on. There are things that he did
Mm.
that were
Hmm.
prescriptive. He prescribed, he said, do.
Yes.
How you go to the bathroom, how
Mm.
you clean yourself, how
Mm.
you eat your food with the right hand and
Yeah.
wash with your left hand. These are prescriptive. These are things which are told to do.
Yes.
And then there are things which just happened,
Mm.
which are also prescriptive, by the way. The things which just happened, for example, tacit approval. So, for example, a companion doing something and him allowing it to happen
Yes.
means that it is allowed in Al Islam to happen.
Mm.
Yeah. So there are, and also we have to also understand there are five rules in Islam. That which you should not do, you get a sin if you did it. That
Hmm.
which you must do, if you don't do it, you get sin. So these are very strict.
Hmm.
And then you have this thing in the middle. So let's ignore the wajib and ignore the haram. Ignore the things that you must do, because we all know, we all get that.
Yes.
Let's ignore the haram, because things you mustn't do, we all get that.
Hmm.
It's this part here which we've got a confusion on. We've got an issue with
Yes.
this bit here.
Yes. Hmm.
Are the particular acts we're talking about, are they from the middle ground where there's no particular attached reward to it,
Hmm.
or is it
Give
from
me
either
give
side?
me give me an example then. Those actions was processing that there's no reward if we do. If you know what I'm saying. Give me an example. What comes to mind?
Um,
A type of food the processor ate. whether he liked a particular
Yeah. So the fact
um,
that the
type
Messenger
of
of Allah,
clothing. Mm.
I'll give you an example. This is actually from the world in Messenger of Allah, where he was offered the dhab, the lizard,
Yes.
and they asked, "Is this prescriptive? Is this something we should be aware of?"
Mm.
And he said, "No, it's just not for my people.
He didn't want to eat it. Okay.
As in, it's not something he was used to. It's not something he is accustomed to."
Yes.
That statement,
Hmm.
"It's not for my people," i.e., you can do it, but it's not for my people. That actually is the most clearest sign that is from the middle path. That
Yes.
is from the thing which is not here or there.
Hmm.
Because if it was from this side,
He
he
was.
would have said it's best not to. Also,
Yes.
or yeah, if on this side it said it's best to do.
Hmm.
Best, not best to. These are still prescriptive, but it's just that you get raw for it, but it's not something where you get sin if you did do it. But the
Yeah.
middle ground
Hmm.
is what we're talking about. That is it. This way, do it or not do it, it means nothing. It's
Yes.
something I just don't want to do. Make me myself personally.
But you can have it if you want to.
But you
No
can have it if you
problem.
want to, no
Yeah.
problem. So the
Yes.
Messenger of Allah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam guided mankind to the best of what
Hmm.
he knew,
Hmm.
and in that particular case of the lizard,
Hmm.
the best of what he knew was, if you want, it's fine. I'm not doing it, but it's not because I'm religious. It's just me.
Got you.
He literally made it as clear as day that this is not a religious thing whatsoever. It's just a
Mm.
personal preference. I don't like that food. I look at Japanese food, all the
Hmm.
octopus and the squid and that kind of stuff, and they cut it
Mm.
raw, and I'm like, nah, blood,
No.
no way,
Stop.
man. Can't do that, man. Oh, octopus and that, and it's alive and it's moving.
They like. I don't know how to do it.
Oh,
Mm.
no. So would I say Islamically you can't do that?
Mm.
No.
Question on that. Sorry. Obviously, fish is halal, no problem. But they eat fish that is alive, moving.
Yeah, I mean that's come down to the issue of ta'zib. That's not punishing the animal. That's wickedness.
Yes. Yes.
But that's under the general remit of not make. I mean, the hadith. It said in the hadith.
Mm.
Then when you go to slaughter well.
Yes.
Make your knife as sharp as possible and
Mm.
bring ease to the thing you're slaughtering. As if then bring
Got you.
ease to the thing. So how is it ease that the fish is still moving and you're dipping your chopstick and you're eating its side and it's still nah.
So
But
that could
that,
be haram. Anyway, yes, from a different
yeah,
from that
because
angle,
but
from harm.
it's from the harm of the animal. So all you have to do
Mm.
is just end its life,
Hmm.
stab its head or whatever, and so it's dead.
Mm.
And then you eat what you eat to eat in it. I mean, if that's what you need to do.
Yeah, that's a good segue into the point that if there are issues in your culture which are haram or disliked, they should be changed, or they should be given up for the sake of Islam or for the sake of
I mean,
act of
in this
worship.
point here,
Mm.
then I think it's good just for those who are unaware about I mentioned these 5 things. I never really went into
Yes.
detail. So in
Mm.
Islam, there are 5 rules,
Hmm.
and if you think about these 5 rules, you can't really imagine a 6th type of a rule. So the first type is that which Allah orders us to do,
Hmm.
and if you don't do it, you're sinful. That's called a wajib, an obligation. And on the other end of the spectrum, with that which Allah orders us not to do, and if we did it, we got a sin. So the two opposite sides. You must do,
Hmm.
otherwise you get sin.
Like pray, for example. Like
Like
yeah.
praying, yeah,
Hmm.
like praying. And that which you must not do, like eat pork, otherwise
Hmm.
sinful. These are two other ends of the spectrum.
Hmm.
Then you go in a bit. Then you go in a bit.
Hmm.
So this is closer to that side. This is closer to that side. That which you are also ordered to do, you must do, just like this. So this you're ordered to do, otherwise you're sinful. This you're also ordered to do as well.
Hmm.
But if you don't do so, it's fine.
Example:
So it's like a recommendation. So for example,
the sunnah before Fajr, 2 sunnah before Fajr.
yeah. So the 2 sunnahs, or all sunnahs, salah, all things that are like praying your salah, you're ordered to do so. But like
Yes, if you
but if you don't do so, it's not sinful.
yes.
And on the other end of the spectrum, this one,
Hmm.
it's closer to this one. So this is haram, you mustn't do. But
Hmm.
right next to it are things you also ordered not to do. So haram you ordered not to do, otherwise
Hmm.
you're sinful if you did it. This one you also ordered not to do, but if you did it,
Hmm.
it's not a big deal. Like cracking your knuckles in salah. It doesn't break your salah, but it's best not to do so.
Oh, moving around, fidgeting in your
Or
salah, you could
fidgeting,
say.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, not to extremes, because if it can break your salah, but
Yeah.
not recommended thing. It's best is not to do that. But if he did do so, he hasn't caused a sin. And then you have this thing in the middle, which is neither here nor there. And as you can see, if you can imagine, it's like a rainbow. Red is over here, blue is over here. This is the green.
Got you.
No, literally.
Yeah.
So you got the red and the
Yeah.
yellow, and you got the green, and then you got the purple or the blue, then you got the purple, whatever. However you look at it. So the green is the green light, as in
Go for it, basically.
go for it. No one can say do, no one can say don't do. But it's usually this part where culture gets involved.
Got you.
It's usually where a culture might say don't do what is you perfectly can do it. Why can't you do that? So a culture might actually make you behave more in this way or in that way. For example, a culture might say don't behave in this way. It's against our culture. Now, in your mind, you're like, but wait, Islam said I can do it if I wanted to. But they'll say, no, don't do that. This is when now the culture now infringes on this part. It kind of makes it behave more in this line or in this line, when in reality it's still here. So, as Islam, you could do that, and there's nothing wrong in doing that. But in respecting those around you, culture, you may still abstain.
Yes, like you said, putting your feet in front of someone, you can still do it.
But so in terms of Islam, it's not sinful. You're not doing it to please Allah. You're not doing it because Islam prescribes you to do so. But you don't want to disrespect someone by being rude to them and whatnot. So you still abstain, or even if it's the opposite, either do. For example, I heard of a topic. Actually, it's funny. There's one Saudi sheikh in Saudi who's doing a Jummah khutbah, and he was talking about when he was in. I think him or one of his students was in England as a foreign student, and he lived with an old lady in England, and she got really upset that he took the spoon, took her sugar, put it into the tea, mixed the sugar into the tea, and then take another scoop of sugar from the sugar thing, and she rebuked him, said, "Don't put the spoon, with the wet spoon with the tea in it, back into the sugar." So she was saying, "Don't do something," but to him it's like, "What's wrong with doing that?" Do you see the difference? So what her mindset was, as in the culture is, you're gonna contaminate the sugar with your tea. You get that? You're contaminating the sugar with your tea. So in that scenario, in that situation, you would say, fair game. I won't contaminate the sugar with your tea. But at the same breath, if you're in your own hotel room on your own, could you contaminate much as you like? It's your sugar. To make sense. So you, as Muslims, you respect the mubahat, the culture of the mubahat of the word is mubah. This thing in the middle is the mubah. The things which are is neither here nor there in Islam. You respect that of other cultures. If they say do, if it's not going to kill you, do it. If they say you mustn't do, then if it's not going to kill you, then stay away from it. You understand it's not Islamically prescriptive, the act, but you also understand that you want to respect other people's cultures. So therefore, you're being nice to them and being respectful to them. So it's an issue of respect. It's an issue of I'm doing this to that. So, but now, again, going a bit. Hopefully, you guys can follow. But now we have aspects of culture that it doesn't exist in this middle path. It doesn't exist here. The tea, the spoon and the sugar, that's here. But for example, bowing down to someone, that's now infringing on other elements of the deen, whereby they would require you to do where Islam says do not do, or Islam says do and they require you not to do. Does that make sense? So the classic one in the UK, you go to work, the lady says, "Oh, hello, my name is Joanne."
Shake the hand.
Now, we know in Islam, man shouldn't shake woman's hand. Man shouldn't touch woman. Don't go near the woman. Why is that? Islam puts strict barriers between male and female to keep the issues to the minimum. There is no issue of sexual harassment can happen as a Muslim. If you follow Islam, you can never be accused of sexual harassment.
Yes.
Or inappropriate behavior.
You won't be in that place.
You wouldn't be in that place.
Yeah.
But again, they require almost culturally that you shake hand. I mean, it's almost rude not to do so. Here now is
Yeah.
where we have this infringement, this complication. How do you behave? And this is where we prioritize. I respect your culture to a point. I respect your
Yes.
culture up until it comes to the gates of Al-Islam. And when Islam says don't come in anymore, don't go any further, I don't go any further.
Mm. Mm.
So as a new Muslim, I always say to people, look, I mean, for me, when I first became Muslim, I wanted to reject everything that was associated with my previous culture, and I wanted to adopt everything of the Muslim culture. And
Yes.
it's more primarily, we know the Muslim culture. We say Arab culture because obviously Islam came from Saudi Arabia or from the Arabian Peninsula. So that's the obvious. You know, the assumption in the head is their culture is the closest to Islam, and there is some truth to that. Their
Yes.
culture is close to Islam as a whole. There is some truth to that. But that doesn't mean that other cultures don't also have things. I've even seen revert sisters, as well, one, like, especially white people wearing shark kameez. I'm like,
Yes.
that's you be a bit taken back. But wait, you wearing shark kameez and your English lady? That's a bit
Yes.
strange.
Yes.
But
Yes.
I've seen it happen. But
Mm.
is there anything wrong with that? I would say not is there not anything nothing not wrong with that. I would say it's recommended.
Have they adopted, in that instance, Arab culture or Islamic dress, or dress that is
That's what I'm
according to
saying.
the
So
Sharia?
I would say the problem we have in the UK.
Mm.
So the problem would be less if that new Muslim lived amongst the Muslims in a Muslim land, because they will just adopt the culture of the surrounding nation.
Mm.
They will just merge and meld and melt within the people, which
Mm.
is what's always happened in Muslim history. Wherever Muslims are, they've always embraced other people and adopted other people.
Yes.
It's always been the case. Islam
Mm.
has the constant behavior of adoption. Whoever you are, wherever you come from, we want you to melt within us and
Mm.
become a part of us.
Mm.
That's why we even have a principle of libas al-shuhra. Clothing that makes you stand out is disliked in Islam. It's actually disliked to make yourself stand out.
Okay. Okay, got you. Yeah. I mean,
So
so
everyone's wearing yellow, and you wear pink. Why?
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
and it makes sense. Think about it. Think about it. Go to any Arab lands, you see the Arabs wearing white thobes. Why are all of them wearing white? Is it uniform or something? What's going on with the white man?
It's very strange. When I first went there, I thought, right, this is strange. Everyone's wearing the same clothes.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
again,
more or
it's
less.
because
Yeah.
look at the principle. Libas shuhra. You are wearing and dressing other than the people. What
Mm.
message are you sending out to the people? You send out to people that I am not from you. I am not with you. I
Mm.
am different from you.
Mm.
Whereas
Mm.
what we want to hear is anta minna. You are from us. Even look at the words in the Message of Allah many times. Whoever
Mm.
does this, they're not from us.
Yes.
Laysa minna, not from us. This is the
Us
Muslim
meaning us.
mentality.
Yeah, us meaning not mina Muslim, not from the Muslims, but he's
Yes.
not saying not from the Arabs. You get what I'm
Well,
saying?
he was talking to the Arabs and saying whoever does this not from us. He wasn't saying whoever does this not an Arab. He was saying whoever does this not from the Muslimin.
Yes, yes,
But the
yes,
point
yes.
is, he look at the wording. He never said laysa minna Muslimin. Laysa
Mm.
minna.
Mina.
Us. Like I said, there is a social identity. That's probably the key word, most important word of this thing. Social identity.
Mm.
And the reason why I say that's a very key word is because even in this society now, how you dress, how you behave is linked linguistically to the word identity. What is your identity?
Mm.
I identify as Jamaican. I identify as Barbadian. I identify as Tobagan. I identify as Nigerian. It's identity.
Mm. Mm.
So as a Muslim, you become Muslim, I adopt a Muslim identity.
Mm.
I identify with those people. I'm sending out a message to everyone. I am from those people. And this is why this is now where how you dress now becomes important because people don't want to dress like an Arab. Okay,
Mm.
if you're in the UK, this is where it comes complicated. If you're in the UK, the overwhelming culture of the people here is a non-Muslim culture.
Yes.
So as a Muslim, we need to identify as a Muslim.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's just something as wearing a kufi. I always say to people, wherever you want to dress in the UK, make sure people identify you as a Muslim.
Yes.
Something about you. Same thing, Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was amongst the Arabs, but there was a way in which the Muslims dressed that identified them as Muslim.
Mm.
Their dress wasn't identical to Quraysh. It was different. They had an Islamic or Muslim identity. It was very similar, but there were specific things that made them different. And you can say, oh yeah, that guy's a Muslim. Now, it used to be back in the day the beard. If you had a beard, obviously you're Muslim. But now that's not even the case
Yeah,
anymore.
yeah. It's a fashion thing now. Yeah.
But
Mm.
my point is, however you are, if you want to wear shawar kameez, if you want to wear lungi, if you want to wear a thobe, if you want to wear a jubba, if you want to whatever you're wearing, we must say, oh, that guy over there is Muslim. Assalamu alaikum. If
Mm.
I look at you and I have no idea what you are, that's a problem.
Mm.
Culturally, that's a problem. And you should feel like it's a problem. You should feel, why should I feel? I mean, why should I leave my house and not have people know that I'm Muslim? So that means all the good I do, if I give to charity, if I'm respectful, if I help someone who's had a car, if all this good I may do that represents Islam, no one would attribute that to Islam.
Mm. Mm.
No one would even know.
One thing that has come to my mind is the fact that Islam can be implemented any place, any time. So when we look at it from the examples you've given, Islam, you might say, and this might, this term is a common term. Can Islam be westernized? Can it be Africanized? Can it be, you might say, Asianized? Kind of mad word. Rather than people having the concept that we embrace Islam, we all have to become Arabs, if you get what I'm saying. Like Islam can be adopted in Western culture, can be adopted in African culture, can be adopted in Asian culture. It will adapt to the situation and the urf, the customs of the people is respected, if you get what I'm saying. It's not something, well, okay, well, we all have to become Arab. No, rather Islam fits in any time, any place, and as long as your culture conforms to the rules and regulations of Islam, it's fine.
Well, the thing is, that's that what you said there. When that question you asked, can Islam be Asianized or Africanized or whatnot? That already
Western
has
life.
to that always has happened.
Yes, yes, yes.
It
But see,
already happened.
when people see, as you said, someone like, for example, a new Muslim, and I've seen it. Someone becomes Muslim, they will take on Arab dress. They'll wear the white thobe and the red gutra, and it's -0. And it's like, well, bruv, like it's cold. Is that because your love of it? Is that because you believe this garment is sunnah? Do you believe this garment is you're doing this because it's Islamic, or is it identity? Do you get what I'm saying? So some people will say, well, why is the brother wearing white thobe and it's -0, and he's wearing a gutcha or kaftan? Do you get what I'm saying?
I mean, I
Has
think.
he now adopted Arab culture rather than Islamic culture? You know what I'm saying?
I mean, this question is an interesting one. I don't think I don't have a definitive answer. That is objectively correct. I have opinions about this, and I'll share them. But I think obviously there's room for conversation in this one. So number one, the main reason why people adopt another culture, like in terms of dress, is because it's the easiest thing to have an identity. As in, there isn't a Western identity that is Islamic, is that sense, or easily classifies you as a Muslim. That makes sense. Meaning that if I was to see a person dressed in this Western clothes, but I would see that element of Islam in them and know they're Muslim. It's not that easy. That's why I say to people, look, at the very least, have a kufi, because at least then there is that distinction. There is that open declaration of al-Islam. I think if there was a clear line, a clear identity or clear culture in in Western countries that was identified as Muslim, then fair enough. That'll be the easiest option. I just don't think that is that hasn't been that hasn't manifested itself. So back just one quick point, which I think is very important to understand. One of the fundamental principles about Islam is al-mukhalafa, making yourself identify openly as different, openly manifest as different. If you don't do that, that's a negative. That goes, as I say, as a negative. Not necessarily sinful, but it can be a negative. So one should identify openly as Muslim in a clear and manifest manner. But if we did have, like I said, if you did have a culture which, or a dress sense and whatnot, a culture which is known, that would mean we know these. For example, imagine there was an area known for Muslims to be predominantly in. And in that area, this is how Muslims were behaving and how they're dressing and that kind of stuff. That everyone knew you're from this particular area. Much like there's actually certain dress sense in amongst the Muslims, the non-Muslims. Certain areas, people might dress a certain way. That, you know, this man's from that manner or that area. That is known. Then if Muslims had that kind of thing, that'd be fine. The problem is that I don't think we have that kind of unity or that kind of thing that exists. And what's happening is that the majority of the Muslims that are in the UK, their identity has been their previous identity in that nation, whether it be from Pakistan or Bangladesh, whatever the case may be. When they've come here, they've brought their culture, and that has been their Islamic identity. Does that make sense? So, ironically, you could say the Western identity, the Western dress sense of a Muslim has been what the Eastern Muslims brought over. Does that make sense, brother? What I mean by that?
Yes.
I mean, if you look at the majority of the Muslims in, let's just say, London or Bradford or Birmingham or Luton, or if you look at the majority of the Muslims in that nation, the way they have chosen to dress has been either the thobe or the shalwar kameez or whatever the case may be. And now that has become their Western identity in that Western country. Does that make sense? And for you to now go against that, you are now actually going against the chosen collective Muslim identity in your area. Does that make sense? So you're not saying I object to Arab culture inside Arabia. You are actually objecting to the Muslim culture in your own vicinity. So again, it's something. And now I've heard some people say this movement. So we should have our own identity. But why?
Yes.
If Muslims, as a collective, as a whole, have chosen to maintain a certain dress sense and identity in London, what makes you pick up yourself that you want to go and change that to something else?
Yes.
By the way, it's not the case where, let's just say, let's play the scenario different. Sheikh Ismail Howell, graduate from Islam University Medina, went to some village in Jamaica, only Muslim in that village. Now the whole village is Muslim.
Inshallah.
And they all dress a certain way. They have the trousers above the ankles. They have the beard. They have the kufi. They have their own dress sense. It's not Arab. It's not Pakistani. It's not Malay. It's not Nigerian. It's none of this stuff. It's their own thing.
Yes.
But it's their thing. Now you go to that area. That's the culture of those people in that area. Why? Because when only Ismail came, but when he got there, he gave him dawah, became Muslim. They coalesced. They became something. They became a community, and they became an identity. That's different. So a call to say we must have our own identity. I get that because they formed that.
Yes.
But now we have a nation, Ismail, and his whole qabila, his whole tribe, his whole people. Them have come from wherever they come from. There's a nation they've settled. There's about 10,000, 100,000 of them, all dressed in a certain way. That is now the culture of the Muslims in that vicinity.
But is there an issue with trying to be distinctively different from your society? Is there a problem with that? Is there like, well, okay, how is it, to intentionally look different? I understand to identify as Muslim. But can that affect dawah if you intentionally seek to look different from your people? If you get what I'm saying.
Well, the thing is
yeah, go on.
Yeah, so I mean, that question applies now.
The balance.
Yeah, but I mean, it applies to the time Mr. Allah. It applies to now, even.
Yes.
The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said very divisive things. Do not even set your camps in eye shot of their camps. That we can that you can see their campfire. Be different. Don't have your hair grey because that's what they do.
Yes.
Don't do this because that's what they do.
Yes.
Don't do that because that's what they do. So it was made very distinct that we are this way and they are that way. Our identity is this, their identity is that. So at the core of Islam, we must have mukhalaf, we must have a different identity, whatever that may be. So just one point I want to make it clear to people. When people say in the West, we Muslims must have a Western identity. You're not opposing anyone but the Muslims in your facility. Listen carefully. You are opposing the agreed identity of the Muslims in your facility. So you're actually making mukhalafa of the Muslimin in favor of muwafaqa, agreement of the non-Muslim. That is the wording. That is the frame of the situation. Let's frame it correctly. We have the prevailing culture of the non-Muslims in this land. You have the prevailing culture of the Muslims who reside in that land, and you are actively calling to oppose what is prevalent amongst the Muslim community and adopt what is prevalent amongst the non-Muslim community.
But you might say, for example, you go into a meeting in boardroom meeting. Do you wear a suit or do you wear thobe? For example, you're going into the post office. Do you queue or do you just jump to the front of the queue?
No, those things are different. Those things are different. So the issue of the queue thing, that's the issue of behavioral norms.
Yes.
And I don't think anyone jumps the queue as a prescriptive thing. I don't think there's any culture that says you must jump a queue. It's more of a lack of, as in they jump the queue because there is nothing that says you must. Having a queue system is prescriptive. That's saying you must not do, and this is the correct way of doing it. People who jump the queue are just unaware of this thing. They're not saying you must jump a queue. They're just unaware that there is a thing called a queue. It's a bit different. Yeah. But the suit question, that's a very interesting one because I do believe that in that particular situation, Muslims do have, I would say, a noticeable culture. Whenever I see Muslims on TV or whatever thing, when they have the suit on, they normally never have a tie.
Yes.
And sometimes might even undo the top button. You might see you can tell that a person to some degree is a Muslim even if he wears a tie because he wears the tie a certain not a suit. He wears the suit a certain way.
Yes.
And even the issue of the tie, there's been an issue of the tie, the origin of the tie, comes to the cross and all kind of stuff. That's the reason why you find Muslims don't wear a tie with a suit. They wear a shirt, they wear the blazer, but they don't wear a tie. So that is actually making a distinction between us and them, which came about from the one that abstained from what was potentially a cross or a manifestation of a cross in dress. So back to our issue is that I think your question was not that though. Your question was, could a Muslim wear a non-Muslim dress and not be sinful? Yes, they can.
Yes. Yeah.
But there are certain things that are prescriptive in that. So we all know the stuff. Not wearing your trousers below the ankle. Not having your clothing describe your inner features, like being so tight that you see all your jewels out of doors. If there's a woman, for example, she must be covering her body. And when this is covering your body, again, this is very, very important for the women to understand. This is an example of how certain dress is not even possible for a Muslim, let alone even a Muslim woman to even wear. Is that a woman's clothing is not just cover your body; it cannot even describe your inner features.
Yes.
So if a woman wears a clothing,
this is prescriptive and it's not cultural.
If you look at the book Sheikh Albani of the Jilbab, it mentions the description of the abaya, description of the clothing. La tasfu al-'idham. The actual wording says doesn't describe the bones. That's the actual linguistic literal translation. It mustn't describe the bones, and the interpretation of that is you mustn't wear clothing that describes your physical features. That even includes Arab dress, quote unquote, or whatever dress that does the same thing. So I see sometimes women, they'll wear the abaya, but they have that little belt around their waist.
Yes.
What does that belt do? It shows the hips. It shows they got a small stomach. It shows they got hips coming out. They got the their bottom
Yeah.
sticking out. That is now wearing Islamic dress, but in a haram manner, because it
Yes.
describes your physical being.
Yeah. I
Which you
mean,
can't do
so
that.
I think that is an example where we've tried to westernize Islamic clothes, if you get what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
yeah, yeah.
By
Well,
putting,
to be honest, I wouldn't say westernized, because that's not suggesting that every type of dress that's provocative is westernized. I think it could be very provocative without being westernized. I mean,
mm,
I mean, there's a woman can even wear a dress that
mhm.
has that belt, but it can't be her outdoor dress.
Yes,
In her
yeah,
house with her husband or whatnot, she can wear
cool,
that, but
cool,
going out of doors, she can't be doing that. She can't be
yeah,
going out and wearing something that we can see how her behind
how
is, and how but you know, she got big belly or not big belly and that kind of stuff. Um, so even same, and by the way, it's not just women, for men as well. Men wear trousers. There's this sports like jogging bottoms that they have now, whereby it's really tight, even after the legs, that then the thigh
yes,
goes like this.
mm,
Now, there's nothing wrong in wearing, if I can describe, this is your leg, this is
yes,
your kneecap. If
mm,
this part is tight, that's not a problem,
yes. We're talking about
because
upper thighs, yeah,
that could be uncovered. Even you can even have shorts up to your knee and it's uncovered. So if this is tight, it means nothing. But
yes,
up here though,
yes, it's
up
not
here
allowed.
though, if it's
Mm,
that's too tight, it's not allowed.
mm,
And what would be my description of what's not that's what's too tight? It's clear. I mean, when you even make sujood, I can
mm,
see your butt sticking out.
mm, mm,
That's clearly too tight.
mm.
Why is that's why I always say you can wear those trousers, but if you wear like a long kameez, like they wear Shirak kameez, they have long kameez,
Yes,
that covers your thigh, that covers that midsection.
mm. I mean
Or another example, gone.
that's a very important point, that the clothes of the Muslim, you could say, is different because it conforms to the Sharia, it conforms to being loose.
Yeah.
It's not a case of
One
adopting. Tfadal.
one last thing, just to conclude on, because we've gone past the hour now. I don't want to leave people in
Mm,
difficulty
mm,
unnecessarily. This doesn't include necessarily what clothing that has function.
mhm,
So, for example, maybe as a builder, you have to wear certain type of clothing
mm,
as a builder, because it has function in your building skill and craft. And that is different from what you do outdoors. You may actually have to dress a certain way because your work requires it, because safety requires it, because of other certain considerations.
mm.
So, for example, and this is a very loose example. I'm not saying this is a general blanket fatwa, but imagine you're a nurse and you're at the operating table and you're not operating on someone's open wound,
Mm,
and they go to extra efforts to make sure you're not spreading infection. So when they actually spend like 20 minutes just washing their arms and their hands with special stuff and whatnot, and they keep their hands clean and their sleeves are up,
mm.
because clothing can spread contamination.
Yes.
So in that scenario, as a nurse, you may be required to uncover here because of the necessity of the
Necessity.
situation.
Yes, yes, yes.
I'm not prescribing that you walk around the hospital all day with your arms uncovered. I'm saying
Yes.
specifically in a scenario where you're operating and it's required not to kill the person with infection. That's where clothing may prescribe a certain thing which is different.
Mm.
Same thing with regards to in hospital. We all been in hospital. They give you this gown, that's nonsense gown, and like, what kind of gown is all
Yeah.
my back off is exposed and whatnot.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
But why do they give you that kind of gown? Because you may be required at an instance to become taking clothes off. They can't be taking stuff over your head and undoing your arm. No, they need someone
Yes.
just to undo the ribbon and pull off, and it's now off.
Yes,
So
yes.
that's prescriptive for a purpose of the situation. That's very different.
Mm,
Our discussion here is just about your outdoor, everyday cultural dress. That's the kind
mm,
of thing we're talking about. That's a good way to probably end on that one. It's a
mm.
big discussion, but
Yeah.
I think I don't want people to take away from this conversation that this whole discussion of culture is
Mm,
dress. There's
mm,
so much more to a culture than just
mm.
dress.
But
And I would seriously advise every
mm,
Muslim. Sorry to buy in. I'll seriously advise every Muslim to consider learning the cultures of the Muslims
Mm-hmm.
as well as the cultures of as well as Islam, and try your best to adopt as much of the culture of the Muslimin,
Mm-hmm.
except that which specifically goes against Islam.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Because by default, we can't. We have to acknowledge the fact we have a nation of Muslims who has had Islam in them for centuries. You
Mm.
just walked in the door.
Mm.
There is no way that you're going to craft a culture overnight better
Mm.
than they have done for generations.
Mm.
Why reinvent the wheel when the wheel is already there?
Mm. Mm. I mean, I think there's a point that came from us that when we're talking about adopting a culture, we're talking about, I'm saying Islamic culture, Quran, Sunnah, or you might say revelation, because what people might have, they say, well, as you said, my culture is better than your culture. When they might say, for example, well, I'm African or Jamaican, why am I taking on Arab culture? Their culture is not better than mine. But the point is, you're taking on the revelation, you're taking on the do's and the don'ts and those actions that are recommended as a means to please Allah.
So yeah,
And not to
to
confuse it
refine,
like, you're
yeah.
not to confuse the fact
So
that,
to
oh,
refine what you're saying, is
mm,
you're primarily
hmm,
adopting the culture of Al-Islam,
yes,
and you're seeking to facilitate that act by
mm,
adopting the culture of the people who
mm,
did this before you. They
yes,
had your idea of adopting Islam as a culture primarily centuries ago. They already did this a long
yes,
time ago.
time ago, yeah, it's in
Some
them,
were
yes,
some were more successful than others, but they already did this before you. You want to
yes,
do the same thing that their forefathers tried to do long time ago. So you're
mm,
doing the same thing, and you're facilitating that by adopting what's already there. It
mm,
will make it easy for you, but you still have the same challenges as anyone else. I mean, they have things they still have yet to fix. That's a given. But it
yes,
will be easier for you to to jump into an ocean that already exists than to go and make a new ocean. If that makes sense.
yes, 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 yes,
So
yes, yes,
it's a two-part season. It's a two-part
yes,
season. One, you're adopting it primarily the culture of Islam, and
yes,
two, you wish to facilitate doing that by
mm-hmm,
also looking to adopt the cultures of the Muslims
mm,
around you. I'm not singling out Arabs, by the way. I
yes,
am saying the Muslims as a whole, whichever Muslim community they are, them
yes,
as a whole. You're going to try and be like them as much as possible, as
mm-hmm.
long as what they do is in line with Islam.
Is
Yeah.
is in line with Islam, and as I said, Islam. You see, there's a famous say, Islam didn't come to change your culture, meaning, and I'm probably going to go over this, many times, that Islam didn't come to make you Arab. Because I do think it's a barrier in this day and time that people think, well, why am I doing this? Because it's Arab. No, it's an act of worship if it was done by the Prophet Sallallahu
But it's also active, just to clarify, it's also active worship to
Alaihi
adopt Muslim behavior and culture. Like I said,
Wasallam. Yes.
we are from that ummah, wherever that ummah may be, we adopt
Mm.
that behavior. Doesn't mean you can't. For example, just try to go on, but just an example. Look
Yeah.
at the Muslims in China, and I did
Yeah.
make this example because they some of the culture in architecture was very vividly different.
Yes.
Even some of the way the massages are done is very vividly different. But architecture doesn't. It's not it's not revealing
Um.
the aura. It's not uncovering your aura.
Yes.
It's not uncovering your inner. It's an identity which is a part of that region.
Mm.
There's no harm in taking here and taking from here and learning and adopting and absorbing. Look at the
Mm.
Turkish massages, how they adopted some of the Roman architecture from that was already there. I mean, there's
Yeah.
no harm in adopting certain things, but then
Yes.
that but that but that now becomes Muslim identity. That's what I'm
Munza
trying to say. It
identity.
now becomes
Yes.
part of Muslim identity. But the
Got you.
problem we have in the UK is that the identity of the Muslims who have come here
Mm. Mm. Mm.
have coalesced to something. And for
Yes.
you to say I'm gonna go something else, you are now true. Oh, anyway, we've said it already.
Yeah.
We've said it already. But yeah,
Excellent. I
so
think we've
it's a
definitely
good
drummed
one.
it. Yes.
Try it's like I said, everyone should. Most important thing here is humbleness. It all comes down to this one thing: is humbleness.
Yes. Yes.
By saying the shahada, you acknowledge that your way is not the
Mm.
best way. There are
Yeah.
other ways that are better. Go out. The benefit is, as a new Muslim,
Mm.
it's actually easier and better for you because you can choose any culture you want without any drawbacks. I mean, as a if you are from Pakistan, then you might be kind of pressured to adopt Pakistani ways. Whereas as
Yeah.
a Jamaican, you could do anything, man. You can go and
Take
wear
a bit of this,
thobe, you
take a
can
bit of
wear
that.
short. Yeah, you could do a bit of this and take a bit of that, and
Yeah. Mix
ahlan wa
and
sahlan.
match.
You could be the what's it called, the United Nation of Colors. You know, be everything.
Yes. Embrace everyone's culture.
Embrace all the Muslims, and that's something
Coast.
all Muslims should do, by the way. All Muslims should do. Alhamdulillah, they tend to do it anyway. I mean,
Mm.
think about it. Muslim cultures. Why is it baklava is in Turkey? It's in Syria. It's in Jordan because
Yes.
they're all exchanged cultures. They all
Yes.
exchange
Yes. Yes.
ways
Yes.
and behaviors and whatnot. It's how Muslims always were. So we should still be that way.
Mm.
Exchange our cultures and adopt our ways and whatnot. Anyway, we can go on
MashaAllah.
about this topic.
Food for thought, inshallah. Sheikh, Jazakallah khair for another insightful
Right,
meeting, and I can't wait till next Saturday, inshallah. Sheikh,
Jazakallah khair.
barakallahu feekum for your time, and we'll speak
Hayakumullah.
again, inshallah. Barakallahu feekum.
Jazakallah khair.
Assalamu
Assalamu
alaikum.
alaikum.
Wa sallam.